A shocking new development just dropped, and it's shaking up the entire WNBA. This time, it's not about a game, it's about money. When details about Caitlin Clark's reported earnings started circulating, fans immediately reacted. But what really caught attention? The response from Angel Reese. What looked like frustration quickly turned into a major talking point across the basketball world. Fans are debating. Analysts are questioning. Because this situation isn't just about one player's pay. It's about fairness, about recognition, and about how the league values its biggest stars. So, what exactly was revealed? And why is this reaction creating so much buzz? Let's break it all down. The moment the numbers started circulating, everything changed. Because money in sports isn't just about salary, it's about value, perception, when and where players stand within the league. So when reports connected to Caitlin Clark began spreading, fans didn't just look at the numbers, they started comparing. Comparing contracts, comparing opportunities, comparing visibility. And that's when the conversation took off, because the WNBA has always operated under a different financial structure compared to other leagues. Rookie contracts are limited, salary caps are strict, and many players earn a significant portion of their income through endorsements rather than league pay. But here's the key detail. Caitlin Clark isn't just any rookie, she's one of the most visible players the league has ever seen. Bringing in record viewership, driving ticket sales, creating a level of attention that goes beyond the game itself. And when a player reaches that level, people expect the financial side to reflect it. But the reality is more complicated. Because while her base WNBA salary follows standard structure, her overall earnings, including endorsements, tell a different story. And that's where things start to shift. Because now, the conversation isn't just about salary. It's about total value, and how that value is distributed across the league. Meanwhile, fans began reacting quickly. Some argued that Clark deserves everything she's earning, that her impact justifies the attention, that she's bringing new energy into the league. Others, they saw it differently. They questioned the balance, the fairness, whether other players are receiving the recognition they deserve. And that's where Angel Reese entered the conversation. Because her reaction, whether direct or interpreted through social media, quickly became part of the narrative. And once that happened, everything escalated. Because now, it wasn't just about numbers, it was about comparison. Clark versus Reese. Attention versus recognition. Visibility versus value. And those comparisons, they drive engagement, they create debate, they pull fans into the story. But here's the key point. Because situations like this are rarely as simple as they seem. WNBA salaries are structured. They follow league rules. They don't instantly adjust based on popularity. And that creates tension. Because modern sports don't operate purely on structure anymore, they operate on attention, on marketability, on who's driving the conversation. And right now, Caitlin Clark is at the center of that conversation, which makes everything around her feel bigger, more intense, more debated. But here's where things get even more interesting, because this situation isn't just about Clark or Reese, it's about the league itself, about how it handles growth, how it manages rising stars, how it balances fairness with business reality. And that's not easy, because growth creates pressure, pressure to adapt, pressure to evolve, pressure to meet expectations that didn't exist before. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. A moment where the WNBA is being pushed into a new phase, a phase where attention is higher than ever, and every detail is being analyzed. But even with all of this, there's still more to the story, because once reactions enter the conversation, the narrative only gets bigger. Once the numbers started spreading across social media, the conversation didn't just grow, it exploded. Because this wasn't just about a contract anymore, it was about perception. And perception in sports can be just as powerful as reality. Fans weren't just discussing Caitlin Clark's reported earnings. They were interpreting what those numbers meant, what they represented, what they said about the current state of the WNBA. And once that interpretation began, the narrative took on a life of its own. Some fans pointed out that Clark's earning power, especially off the court, is a reflection of her impact. The viewership she brings, the attention she generates, the way she's expanded the audience for women's basketball. From that perspective, everything made sense. But on the other side, There were questions, loud ones, me about balance, about whether other players, including Angel Reese, are receiving the same level of recognition. Because when one player becomes the center of attention, it naturally creates comparisons. And comparisons, they create tension, especially in a competitive environment. Meanwhile, the reaction tied to Angel Reese became one of the biggest talking points. Not necessarily because of one specific statement, but because of how her response was interpreted. Social media posts, body language in recent appearances, subtle reactions that fans quickly connected to the situation. And once those interpretations started spreading, the narrative shifted again. Because now it wasn't just about Clark's earnings. It was about how other players felt about them, and that added another layer of intensity. Because in sports, why perceived rivalry drives engagement. Clark versus Reese became more than just a matchup. It became a storyline. One tied to recognition, to opportunity, to how players are valued both on and off the court. But here's the key detail. Because much of this reaction is built on interpretation, not direct confirmation. And that matters. Because in today's media environment, perception spreads faster than facts. A single post, a single clip, a single moment can be turned into a larger narrative almost instantly. And that's exactly what happened here. Meanwhile, analysts started weighing in, breaking down the structure of WNBA salaries, explaining how endorsement deals work, highlighting the difference between league pay and total earnings. Because the reality is, those two things are not the same. Team Clark's base salary follows the same rookie structure as others, but her endorsement deals, driven by her visibility, are what separate her financially. And that's where the conversation becomes more complex, because endorsement opportunities aren't controlled by the league. They're driven by market demand, by brand interest, by audience engagement. And right now, Caitlin Clark is one of the most marketable athletes in the sport, which explains the gap. But understanding that doesn't eliminate the tension. Because from a player's perspective, the comparison still exists. The attention, the opportunities, the way certain players are positioned in the spotlight. And that's where emotion can enter the conversation. Not necessarily as frustration, but as competitive energy. Because athletes don't just compete on the court, they compete in recognition too, in impact, in how they're viewed within the game. And that's what makes this situation so compelling. Because it's not just about money, it's about identity, about where players see themselves within the league, and how that aligns or doesn't align with public perception. Meanwhile, fans are fully engaged, debating every angle, supporting different sides, turning this into one of the biggest conversations in the sport right now because it touches on something deeper than just numbers. It touches on fairness, on growth, on how a league evolves when new stars enter the spotlight. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because while the debate continues, the league itself is being watched closely. How it responds, how it handles the narrative, and how it balances recognition across multiple players. Because this moment isn't just about one situation, it's about what it leads to next. And that's where the real story begins to take shape. At this point, the conversation had completely taken over. Not just social media, but the entire basketball space. Because what started as a discussion about earnings had turned into something much bigger, a debate about value, about recognition, about how players are viewed within the WNBA. And right at the center of it all, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. But here's the key detail. This wasn't just about them as individuals. It was about what they represent. Two different paths, two different styles, two different types of impact on the game. And when those differences are placed side by side, the conversation naturally intensifies. One, because fans don't just watch players anymore, they compare them. Constantly. Who's more impactful? Who deserves more recognition? Who is bringing more value to the league? And those comparisons, they don't stay neutral. They create sides, debates, arguments that go far beyond the game itself. Meanwhile, the narrative around Angel Reese continued to grow, not necessarily because of direct statements, but because of how her reactions were being interpreted. And that's where things become complicated, because interpretation can easily turn into assumption. A look, a post, a moment captured on camera, all of it can be turned into a story. And once that story spreads, it becomes part of the narrative. Whether it's fully accurate or not, that's the reality of modern sports media. Everything is amplified. Everything is analyzed. Everything becomes part of the conversation. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because while fans are debating, players are still competing, still focused on the game, still dealing with the reality of performance under pressure. And that's an important distinction, because while the narrative is growing outside, the game itself continues inside. And that's where everything is ultimately decided, but the narrative still matters. Because it shapes perception. It influences how players are viewed. It affects how the league is discussed. And right now, that narrative is centered around balance. Balance between attention and recognition, between marketability and performance, between individual success and collective growth. And that's not an easy balance to maintain, especially in a league that's expanding as quickly as the WNBA is right now. Because growth creates spotlight, and spotlight creates comparison, and comparison creates tension. That's the cycle, and we're seeing it play out in real time. But here's the key point. Because this tension isn't necessarily negative. In fact, it can be a sign of progress. Because it means people care. It means they're invested. It means the game is reaching a level where these conversations matter. And that's a good thing. But it also comes with challenges. Because managing that level of attention requires balance. From the league, from the players, from the media. Because if the narrative becomes too focused on comparison, it can overshadow the game itself. And that's something the league has to navigate carefully. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark continues to be at the center of the spotlight, not just because of her performance, but because of what she represents. A new level of visibility, a new audience, a new wave of attention that's pushing the league forward. And that attention is valuable, but it also creates pressure because now every move she makes is analyzed. Every moment becomes part of a larger story. And that's not easy to manage. But based on everything we've seen so far, she's handling it. Meanwhile, Angel Reese is also part of that story, not just as a competitor, but as a key figure in the league's growth. A player with her own impact, her own following, her own influence on the game. And that's what makes this situation so complex. Because it's not about one player being right or wrong. It's about multiple players existing within the same spotlight, and how that spotlight is distributed. But here's where everything starts to connect. Because at the end of the day, the conversation always comes back to one thing: performance. Because no matter what's said, no matter what's debated, no matter how intense the narrative becomes, the game itself is what defines everything. And that's where this story is heading next. At this point, the story has evolved far beyond where it started. What began as a conversation about earnings has now become a full-scale discussion about identity, value, and the future of the WNBA. Because when attention reaches this level, nothing stays simple. Everything becomes layered. Everything becomes connected. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. The numbers, the reactions, the comparisons. They're all part of a bigger picture. A picture that reflects how the league is changing in real time. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because now, the focus is shifting again. From reaction to expectation. Fans aren't just reacting to what happened anymore. They're looking ahead, asking what this means for the future, for players like Caitlin Clark, for players like Angel Reese, and for the league as a whole. Because moments like this don't just create debate, they create direction. They influence how things move forward, and that's where the real impact lies. Meanwhile, something important is happening behind the scenes. The level of competition is rising. Because when attention increases, players respond. They elevate their performance. They bring more intensity. They push harder to stand out. And that's exactly what's happening now. Because no player wants to be left out of the conversation. No player wants to feel like the spotlight belongs to someone else. So what happens? They compete harder. They perform at a higher level. They create moments of their own. And that's how the game grows. Not through one player, but through the response of everyone around them. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because it's not just about Clark or Reese. It's about the entire league rising together. But here's the challenge. Because while competition is increasing, so is pressure. For everyone. Because now, every game carries more weight. Every performance is analyzed. Every moment becomes part of the narrative. And that's not easy to manage. Especially in a league that's still adapting to this level of attention. Yeah, but that's the reality of growth. It comes with challenges. It comes with moments like this, moments where everything is under the microscope. But those moments are also opportunities. Opportunities to improve, to evolve, to build something stronger moving forward. Meanwhile, the conversation around fairness continues. Because at its core, that's what this situation is about. Not just money, but recognition. Not just attention, but balance. And that's something every growing league has to navigate. How to highlight its biggest stars, while still recognizing the depth of talent across the board. And that's not easy. Because attention naturally concentrates. It focuses on certain players, certain stories, certain moments, and that can create gaps in perception. But those gaps don't define reality. They define narrative. And narrative can change over time, through performance, through consistency, through players continuing to prove their value on the court. And that's exactly where this story is heading. Because while the debate continues off the court, the real answers will come from the game itself, from how players respond, from how teams compete, from how the league evolves through this moment. But here's where everything connects. Because this situation is a reflection of something bigger, a league in transition, moving from one level of attention to another. And that transition isn't always smooth. It comes with tension, with debate, with moments where things feel unbalanced. But those moments are part of the process. They're signs that something is changing, that the game is reaching new levels. And that's exactly what's happening here. But even with all of that, there's still more to the story. Because the final phase isn't about reaction or expectation. It's about outcome. At this stage, everything has built toward one key question. What happens next? Because the conversation has already reached its peak. The numbers have circulated. The reactions have gone viral. The comparisons between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese have taken over the narrative. Now, the focus shifts forward. Because in sports, moments like this don't end with discussion. They continue through performance. And that's where everything becomes real. Because no matter how intense the debate gets, the court is where it's all decided. Meanwhile, expectations have changed. For Caitlin Clark, the spotlight is now even brighter, not just as a player, but as a symbol of the league's growth. Every game she plays carries added weight. Every performance is evaluated more closely, because now she's not just being watched, she's being measured. Measured against the attention, against the narrative, against everything that's been said about her impact. And that's a different level of pressure. But it's also an opportunity, because players who thrive in that environment become something more. They become defining figures. Meanwhile, Angel Reese is also stepping into a new phase, not because of anything she directly said, but because of how the narrative has positioned her, as part of the comparison, as part of the conversation. And that creates its own kind of pressure. Because now, every performance she delivers is also being evaluated in that context. Not just on its own, but in relation to the broader story. And that's not easy, because athletes don't just compete against opponents. They compete against expectations, against perception, against narratives that exist beyond the game itself. And that's exactly what both players are dealing with now. Meanwhile, the WNBA is also entering a critical phase, because how the league navigates this moment will shape its future, not just in terms of competition, but in terms of identity. Because right now, the league is balancing two powerful forces, growth and expectation. Growth brings attention, expectation brings pressure, and managing both at the same time, that's the challenge. But it's also the opportunity, because if handled correctly, this moment doesn't become a controversy, it becomes a turning point. A moment where the league embraces its new level of visibility and builds something stronger from it. But here's the key detail, because none of that happens without performance. Because at the end of the day, the game itself is what defines everything. Not the headlines, not the debates, not even the narratives, just the game. And that's where this story continues. With every matchup, with every performance, with every moment where players step onto the court and respond. Because now, the response matters more than ever. For Clark, for Reese, for every player in the league, because they're all part of this moment. A moment where attention is higher than ever, and the stakes feel bigger than ever. Meanwhile, fans are fully invested. Not just watching games, but following the story, tracking performances, I'm comparing expectations to reality, because now there's something to prove, not just individually, but collectively, that the game can rise to this level of attention, that it can sustain this momentum, that it can continue growing without losing balance. And that's what makes this phase so important. Because it's not just about what's happening now, it's about what it leads to. The next level of the league, the next generation of players, the next stage of growth. But even with all of that, there's still one final piece left. Because beyond the performance, beyond the pressure, beyond the expectations, there's one thing that will define this entire moment. What it becomes. At the end of everything, after the headlines, after the reactions, after the debates that took over the basketball world, we're left with something much bigger than a single moment. We're left with a turning point. Because what started as a conversation about earnings has evolved into something deeper, a reflection of where the WNBA is right now, a league in transition, a league growing faster than ever before, and a league learning how to handle the pressure that comes with that growth. At the center of it all, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. But again, this isn't just about them, it's about what they represent. Two players, two paths, two forms of impact that are shaping the conversation in different ways. And when those paths intersect, the spotlight intensifies. But here's the key truth. Because beyond the narrative, and beyond the comparisons, beyond everything being said, the game itself remains the foundation. Because no matter how loud the conversation gets, performance is what defines everything. And that's where the real story continues. On the court, in the games that follow, in the moments where players respond not with words, but with action. Meanwhile, the impact of this moment is already clear. More people are watching, more people are engaged, more people are invested in what happens next. And that's what makes this a turning point, because attention like this doesn't just happen. It builds. Through moments like this, through conversations that pull people in, through narratives that make the game feel bigger than just the score. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. But here's where things get even more important. Because moments like this don't just shape perception in the present. They influence the future, how players are valued, how the league evolves, how attention is distributed across the sport. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because it's not just about what happened. It's about what comes next. Will the league adapt to this new level of attention? Will it find balance between rising stars and established players? Will it continue building momentum in a way that benefits everyone involved? These are the questions that define the future, and the answers will come over time. Through decisions, through performances, through the way the game continues to grow. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark continues to move forward within the spotlight. And not just as a player, but as a central figure in this new era. Every game she plays adds to the narrative. Every performance builds on the expectations. And that's not easy, but it's part of the moment she's in. At the same time, Angel Reese continues to be part of the story. Not just through comparison, but through her own impact, her own presence, her own role in shaping the league's future. And that's important, because this isn't a one-player story. It's a multi-layered narrative involving many voices, many perspectives, many paths that all contribute to the growth of the game. But here's the final takeaway. Because when everything settles, when the debates slow down, when the headlines move on, this moment will be remembered for one thing: impact. The impact it had on the conversation, the impact it had on how players are viewed, and the impact it had on the direction of the league moving forward. Because moments like this don't disappear. They leave a mark. They shape perception. They influence what comes next. And that's exactly what this has done. It has pushed the WNBA into a new level of attention, a new level of discussion, a new phase where everything matters more. And that's a powerful place to be. Because with attention comes opportunity. Opportunity to grow, to improve, to build something that lasts. But only if it's handled correctly. And that's where the future begins. Right here, right now, at the intersection of pressure, opportunity, and change. And if this moment is any indication, the next chapter is going to be bigger than anything we've seen before. So what do you think about this situation? Is Caitlin Clark's rise in earning power completely justified? Or does the WNBA need to do more to balance recognition across players like Angel Reese? Drop your opinion in the comments right now, because this debate is only getting bigger. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the biggest stories in basketball. We're covering everything, from rising stars to league-changing moments and the real stories behind the headlines. Share this video with your friends, and let's see who really understands what's happening beyond the surface. Because in today's game, it's not just about performance, it's about perception. You're at hashtag Caitlin Clark, hashtag Angel Reese, hashtag WNBA, hashtag basketball debate, hashtag WNBA news, hashtag women in sports, hashtag sports drama, hashtag basketball talk, hashtag viral sports, hashtag sports update at WNBA at ESPN, at Bleacher Report, at Sports Center at NBA.